I'm in the middle of the Atlantic on an ocean rowing boat with 3 people I barely know. The boat isn't much bigger than a large family car, and when I look out, all I see for miles and miles and miles is just the ocean. The team and I have got one task, and that's to row 3,000 miles across the Atlantic, from Spain all the way over to the Caribbean. And we've got one goal, and that's to be the winning female team in the race against 27 other boats. Every now and again, a huge swell of water scoops up my oars and sends the handle crashing into my shin, confirming the fact that I don't actually like rowing. And then I sit there with that view, and I think, how the bloody hell did I get here? Today, I'm going to be talking to you about how I went from a shopaholic beauty salon owner to minimalist ocean rower. I'm also going to tell you about how my team and I battled the Atlantic, the vast Atlantic, and all of the challenges in between. But having told you that I rowed across the Atlantic, some of you may have made the assumption that I may be an athlete. Maybe I'm a rower. Perhaps I came from a background of being outdoors, or my parents were sporty, but none of that was true. As a child, I was a dancer, and I spent all of my spare time in the dance studio. I wasn't interested in anything else. I didn't know how to climb trees. I never went camping because my family just wasn't into stuff like that. And the most ocean experience I had was getting on board a ferry aged 7 to go to Denmark to Legoland. The first time I went camping, I was 29, and the only reason that I went was because I fancied the guy that invited me. And even then, I had a horrible time, but I didn't tell him that. As a young adult, I realized my dream of becoming a professional dancer just wasn't going to happen because my family didn't have enough money to send me to dance school. So that's when I set my heart on one day having my own beauty salon. I could play with makeup and cosmetics all day long, and I could get paid for it. So fast forward to age 24, and I have my own beauty salon and staff. We were really busy, super successful, and I earn lots of money. But the problem is no one ever taught me what to do with that money. So I spent it. I spent it on gadgets and gizmos, the latest technology, furniture to fill my house, and designer clothes to fill my ever-bursting wardrobe. And then as I approached 30, I started to panic. I felt as though life was passing me by. And I stood in my house, looked at all my things, and I looked inside of me and realized that all these things weren't making me happy. What I really wanted to be doing was able to run through the countryside. I wanted to be able to run up and over mountains. I wanted to do marathons and all of the cool adventures that I'd seen on TV. So with that, I decided to swap my things for experiences. I began selling all of my belongings, and I thought to myself, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a runner. So I went out. As the last thing I bought as a shopaholic was a pair of running trainers, a really expensive pair of running trainers, because expensive things makes us good at stuff, right? I laced them up, and I wanted to go running around the block. And at the end of the road was a bridge. It was 0.7 miles away. By the time I got to the bridge, I had to stop. My lungs were on fire and my legs were burning. I had to turn around, and I walked back home, and I was crying because I was so frustrated. Like, how could I not even run 1 mile? Each day I ran to the bridge, and I ran a little bit further home, until one day I could run all the way to the bridge and all the way back without stopping. I was able to run 1.4 miles. I was becoming a runner. 1.4 miles turned into 5 kilometers. That turned into 10 kilometers. And within a few years, I was able to run half marathons and marathons. Fast forward to when I'm age 32, and I'm sat in my kitchen scrolling through Facebook when an event pops up. It's the kind of event that I'd always wanted to do, but I just knew that I wouldn't be able to do it. It was a 24-hour endurance event. I showed my then boyfriend, and he said, yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that. I gave it, I didn't think anything of that comment. I gave the post a like. I wrote something like, this looks really cool, and thought nothing more of it. And then later on that day, I received a message from a friend who knew the event organisers. He had a spare ticket, and did I want it? I didn't know anyone that was going to the event, I didn't have any of the right equipment, and I definitely hadn't been doing the right training. But 6 weeks later, I stood at the start line with a team of people that I'd never met. 25 and a half hours later, I finished the event. But not only had we finished it, we'd won it. And that was a real pivotal point in my life where I thought, well, I didn't think I could do that, and I did it. What else can I do? Over the next few years, my life changed quite dramatically through a roller coaster of events. The 24-hour event led to a 48-hour event where I was on the move for 56 hours in total. I didn't get any sleep, and I vowed during that event never to do anything like it again. The sleep deprivation was agonizing. But curiosity got the better of me, and I saw an event to row 1,800 miles around the coast of Great Britain. And I wasn't a rower, I didn't know how to row, but I thought to myself, I once wasn't a runner, and I taught myself how to run. Maybe I can teach myself how to row. As a result of rowing around Great Britain, I was then invited to join 3 strong women to row across the Atlantic. Despite not knowing the team and only having a handful of training sessions, a few months later, we stepped off land and onto our boat, and we wouldn't see land or any other humans for 6 weeks or more. What could possibly go wrong? I'd like to play a game with you guys. This was our boat. It's 8.6 meters long by 1.5 meters wide, perhaps the same surface area as this stage. And I would like you to imagine living on that boat for 6 weeks with 3 of your best friends. Because you're shaking your head. It gets worse. Now I'd like you to imagine living on this boat with perhaps 3 of your work colleagues, maybe even 3 people from this room. And now imagine getting on with 3 people that you don't know, and then there's a few of the people that you suspect that you're not going to get on with. People ask me if the challenge was hard, and of course it was. We rowed in 2-hour shifts, 2 hours on and 2 hours off, all throughout the day and all throughout the night. In our off shift, we would need to take care of our bodies, our hydration, our food, the boat, and our navigation. And on average, we would sleep for about 1 hour and 20 minutes. We pooed in a bucket and watched our teammates do the same. We ate a diet of dehydrated food for 6 weeks. Our bums were chafed, our hands were blistered, and our joints were swollen. And one day we counted the amount of steps we took, and it was just 25 in a day. And at this point, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The differences of personality on board the boat was quite great, and that meant that the team dynamics didn't work very well. Not only were we taking part in the biggest adventure of our life, but now we had to deal with social issues on board this tiny boat. I'll let you a little bit further into that secret. I was one of the people on the boat that was involved in the social issues. My personality was very different to someone else on board. Neither was a bad personality, they were just different. And the way that I like to think about it was that one person was like Baileys, chocolatey and smooth, and the other one was like champagne, fruity and effervescent. Both delicious and both great for different occasions, but put together, they curdle and they don't mix. So I'm guessing you're wondering how we coped with that. Well, on board the boat, we had 2 questions that we would always ask ourselves. And number 1 was, are we safe and are we well? The answer was mostly yes, but if anyone on the boat was ever feeling under the weather, sad, or depleted, we would ask them, what can we do to make you feel better? And we would take action with their answer. And then the second question was, why are we here? And we always had the same answer, no matter what, and that was to win the female race. And what this did, this simplified everything. This allowed us to put aside our differences and focus on uniting our common goal as a team. Excuse me for a second. Despite the differences, believe it or not, there wasn't much conflict or negativity on the boat, because we realized by expelling time and energy on negative thoughts, feelings and emotions, we was using precious resources and we wasn't able to get the task done. Now, in everyday life, if I was to ever meet someone that I didn't get on with, I would just flee. I would just go. But I couldn't escape from this boat. I was hundreds, if not thousands of miles from land. And at one stage, the closest humans to us were up in space. There was nowhere to hide. No matter how hard it was, I felt grateful for that situation. Perhaps it was the same personality traits that we didn't get on that actually made my teammate excellent at her job. There was a certain task on the boat, and that was to change the autopilot every 4 hours throughout the whole challenge. The autopilot keeps you on course. And she did it every shift. She got up early and did that task, that vital task. And I got news from land support that some of the other teams weren't doing it because they didn't know how to. And so they just left the autopilot on, and then it burnt out. And then it broke, and it meant that their speed decreased. But because of my teammate, despite our differences, she did it every shift, and we was able to maintain full speed. I was laying in the cabin one day, and I was thinking about our relationship, or lack of relationship. And I started to feel upset that we weren't friends. And then I realized that I was focusing on the negative. So I shifted my thought process, and I started thinking about everything that she brought to the boat and everything that was good. And everything that was good between us. For instance, changing the autopilot. And we would fill up each other's water bottles. She would put sun cream on my back. We would keep our cabin really tidy. And even though we didn't get on, we was helping each other, and that was helping us achieve our goal. Not only did we have our personal battles, but we also battled Mother Nature. There was one day where we was rowing for 9 days straight because we had a headwind, and 6 miles of that was with our left oar only. We had news that morning that the wind was going to only last for 4 hours. And so we put 3 people rowing and 1 person on hand steering to gain more power. But after 5 hours, it was very clear that the wind was not going to stop. Each hour into our rowing session, one of us on board the boat was feeling tired, but it was only ever 1 person at a time. So we provided encouragement, and we just kept on going. And after 9 hours, the wind finally stopped. We was able to have a rest. We celebrated with a massive bag of peanut M&Ms. But in that time, I got news from land support that some of the other teams had actually decided to stop rowing. We'd been traveling at 0.5 miles an hour for that 4 hours, so we'd covered just over 4 miles in 9 hours with everybody on deck. But most importantly, all the other people that had stopped rowing had drifted back. So we'd actually made up about 10 miles. Not everything on the boat went to plan. The weather was always changing, things would break, and each of us would have good and bad shifts. And we had a saying on the boat, very simple saying, it will pass. We always knew that any bad situation would pass. There was this one day, we were 39 days into the challenge, and my body and my mind, I'd had enough. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I came out on deck, and I said to the girls, I'm going to put my headphones in. And translated, that meant, don't talk to me. And normally that would only last maybe 1 or 2 shifts, but it lasted for 3 days. I didn't think that that feeling would ever go, and I kept saying to myself, it will pass. It will pass. Oops, excuse me. And then finally, after 3 days, I stepped out, I felt good, and the earphones came out. I use this phrase in my everyday life. It really helps now. If I'm in a difficult situation or a little bit of a sticky situation, I always know, no matter what, it will pass, and things will change. We also had another saying on the boat, and that was, just get on with it. I'd be laying in my cabin and the waves were as tall as a house. They would be crashing over the boat and it was so noisy that we couldn't get to sleep despite being exhausted. 1:50 in the morning, and imagine what it feels like when your alarm goes off. At 1:15 you have to get out and start rowing. It was pitch black outside and it was cold. I was tucked up, warm inside my sleeping bag, and I just did not want to go rowing. But my teammate was out there and she'd been rowing for 2 hours and she was desperate for a rest. She was waiting for me to come out. So I'd lay there and I'd say out loud, just get on with it. And with that, I'd get up, get dressed, and get out. And I use this saying in my everyday life all the time. For example, doing the housework. I mean, who seriously likes doing the housework? And it's like, just get on with it. And that task that's at the top of our list of things to do for days and days, maybe even months, perhaps even years, just get on with it. And for me, a typical one was I was the one that never put the bins out. I was the person running down the street in my pajamas after the bin man with the bin bags in my hand. But now, I just get on with it. Something really simple. After 43 days, 2 hours and 20 minutes, we crossed the finish line in Antigua. But we also achieved our goal, and we were the winning female team in the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge 2018. I think back to all the challenging times on the boat, the fact that my teammate and I didn't see eye to eye. I thought about that dreaded alarm going off in the middle of the night and the weather that made it feel like we were rowing through concrete. And then I realized those were the juicy bits. Those were the bits that I learned the most from. It helped give me an understanding of people and situations, and it provided me with a way to increase my patience, my discipline, and my gratitude. So I'm sitting on the boat and I think back to the pair of trainers, I think back to the bridge, and I think back to the boyfriend that told me I couldn't do it. And then I think of all the events that have unraveled over the past few years, and then I realize we can do anything that we put our mind to. Thank you.